Welcome back to Dev Talks Podcast. Today I am sitting down with Lieutenant Governor Hopeful Tim Baker. How you doing, Tim?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, man. Thanks for making the drive down. You can pull that to you. Thanks for making the drive down.
You
Thanks
bet.
for giving me the time to sit down and talk about what you're wanting to do with the state of Missouri and why you. Let's start off. Who are you?
Well, my name's Tim Baker. I'm from Franklin County, and Franklin County is just the first county just west of St. Louis County, for the listeners that may not know. My late parents and I used to own a manufacturing plant, so my background's in manufacturing. But before I go into that, I probably ought to say that I'm married to my lovely wife, Debbie, for 30 years. We celebrate 30 years this year. I have 4 daughters, and we celebrated the birth of our first grandchild, who will be celebrating his first birthday next week, actually.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. So we're very happy about that. So as I said, my background's in manufacturing. So my late parents and I used to run an ice manufacturing plant. So for our listeners down here, Brewer's Ice, which is what I knew Nancy really well.
Yep.
And so we did that for 48 years.
Okay.
And but I do know what it's like to pull money out of my own pocket to actually pay for things. Ice business is a lot like farming. We pray for good weather, especially on the weekends. And the 4th of July, which we just celebrated yesterday, was actually Christmas for us. That was the largest holiday for the ice business. And then you better, you know how to budget your money, because it's hard to sell ice in January, February, and March.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
And you kind of owning that ice business and working with it, that's kind of what got you into starting with politics, correct?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. Because my whole life I've been taught to serve. So through that time working at the ice plant, I've served on numerous boards, such as local chamber of commerces. 2 of, in fact, in Pacific, I was president of that one for 6 years, and I've been on the board for about 15. I currently sit on the St. Clair Chamber, was past president of that. Been on United Way. I serve on Grace's Place. I'm the current chairman of a local bank. Did a lot with our schools. I mean, my whole life I've done nothing but serve. And while we ran the ice plant, I was actually approached to run for state rep. And I turned it down because my kids were small. And with the timing, I didn't think I could, do my business successfully and still do that as well. And if I can't do something well, I'm not going to do it. So in 2011, we sold our business due to multiple reasons. And I live in rural county, rural county. So I actually decided to run for county, because I was always taught, again, if you can't clean up your own home backyard, why go on somewhere else?
That's a good point.
So I ran for commissioner, and it was a field of 4 in 2012, and I lost. I learned a lot. 2 years later, I ran for presiding commissioner, and I ran against a very strong incumbent. I actually ran as an independent that year. So I had to actually go out and get signatures to be put on the ballot for November. Was successful in that. Actually had more votes than any other independent in our county, but was still unsuccessful running against a incumbent, because a lot of people didn't understand the difference between an R and I and a D.
Yeah.
So learned a lot in that race. 2 years later, I ran for first district commissioner again, lost to a gentleman with the same pretty similar. He was Tim A. Brinker. I'm Tim A. Baker. And he's presiding still today, and I happen to be the current county clerk, and a lot of people get us confused even when they call us today. So that was, I took that as, again, we learned something. I tell people that because I'm not ashamed of it. I tell people that because I'm a fighter.
Yeah.
You knock me down, I'm going to get back up. And as they say, it's not how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times that you get back up. Because if you stay down, you're done.
Exactly. And failing is one of the best teachers,
you betcha,
as far as like what you're doing, or even in business. You fail, but that one time you succeed is the one time you're looking for.
That's right. So fast forwarding again, we went to, I was going to run for commissioner again, and my wife told me, no way, there's no way I'm going to let you do that. I'll divorce you type of scenario. But a good friend of mine came to me and said, hey, our county clerk's retiring. Why don't you run for county clerk? We know you want to serve and see what you can do. And I'm like, no, I don't want to be a county clerk. County clerks actually do probably more than what people realize.
Yeah.
They're the record keeper. They do all the payables, receivables. There's a lot of stuff that goes through. In fact, every piece of paper literally goes through the county clerk's office. So it's a big responsibility. I'm like, I'm a decision maker, not a paper pusher.
Yeah.
And as they say, you want to make God laugh, tell him your plan.
Exactly.
And so during that campaign, I actually talked about my faith more than I did my politics, going door to door. And I won 67% of the vote, and found out I fell in love with elections.
Yeah.
And with that, since I've been county clerk, I've taken my business background and I've saved my county over $700,000. One of the biggest things that I've done is I actually started a zero budget and worked my way up. A lot of offices just start at the ending total and add to it.
Yeah.
And I go to my commissioners with what I need, not with what I want. And so with that, I've been able to rip a Band-Aid off of wasteful spending. 2 of the phrases I hate more than anything are, that's the way it's always been done, or if you don't use it, you lose it. And that's where the zero balance comes in at, or the zero budget comes in at, to work your way up. So with that, and then the other thing that I'm really proud of that I've done, I've also helped keep a better chain of custody with our ballots since I've been in office. With my logistic background, there's a lot of stuff we've done to make sure that our ballots are secure than what they were. Not that my predecessor did anything wrong, but we've just made it more transparent and more secured by what we're doing.
And nowadays that is a big thing with the people and the voters, is secure ballots. I mean, the fact that you've brought that concern up and you work to fix it, that's telling on that you listen to the people.
Oh yes. Yeah. And we're open. If you want to see, I mean, if you ever wanted to come up and you're not a citizen in our county, if you want to see how I do, call me. I'll tell you. I mean, I'll show you exactly what we do. I've got nothing to hide because if you don't believe in our system, how can I expect everybody to believe in the system?
Exactly.
And so we're an open book. We don't board up our windows when we do recounts or anything like that. We're open to everybody.
Yeah.
We
transparency is one of the main things for government.
Well, at the end of the day, I work for you, not the other way around. Yes. And I do know that. I know that I work for the citizens, not for my own agenda.
And that seems to get lost in a lot of politicians, is that they get up there and I don't know if it's like an ego stroke that, yes, I'm elected, so I'm just going to do what I want and the citizens will love me for it, but the ones who have the self of service to the people are, I think now more than ever, more important and more detrimental to our republic to get voted in to do what's right for the citizens.
Well, and with that getting lost, I've noticed even with a lot of good people, they surround themselves with a lot of bobbleheaders and yes people. That's why they run into that trap, because then every time they say something, everybody goes, oh, that's gold, man. That's instead of, I surround myself with people that disagree with me because those are the ones that challenge you. And don't get me wrong, there's days that I'm like, hey, it's my way or the highway.
Exactly.
But because everything falls on my shoulder, but I surround myself with people that I know think outside the box, and that's what helps make us grow. Our business was only successful because of the 88 employees we had. It wasn't just because of me and my family. We take all the responsibility, but they're the outreach. You're a business person. Your employees are your arm out there, and if you don't listen to them, because they're the ones in the trenches doing everything.
They know, the employees of businesses know more about the inner workings of a business than the owner will ever know.
Amen.
They see it day to day. They see the hangups. They see the problems, and they see the good things that happen. And that's important, listening to them.
Exactly. And that's the other thing that I've always been brought up on was, do everything basic. My whole pretense behind my whole campaign is back to the basics with Baker. Keeping things simple, the simple does right. And if you do everything, not the easy things, but if you do everything right and you do it simply, everything else falls into place. I tell my staff that right now in my office. I have a great staff. I've always been blessed to have a great staff, whether it was at the ice plant or at the county clerk's office, because people, one, they know that we're going to do things right. And two, if they mess up, I'll take every bullet for them, because that's my job. That's what I'm supposed to do. Yeah. They do all the inner works, like you said, and my job is to oversee it and make sure that if there is a mistake, hey, I've got your back. I'm not going to throw you under the bus just because you messed up. Now if they steal or something like that, that's a little different ballgame.
That's on them.
But there's honest mistakes that happen all the time, and people are we're in this cancel culture where if you mess up once, you automatically lose your job. And I'm sorry, that just bothers me. And a true leader should stick up for their people, except for, like I said, stealing. If you defraud something, that's completely different. You're talking a different ballgame.
Well, we're dealing with a lot of that down where I live in Mountain View. That's where our business is, and we're going through a lot of that right now, and got a lot of those politicians who just don't want to admit fault, who don't want. And the thing is, people can sunshine all the information. They can see it. Like in Mountain View, I don't mean to get off tangent, but just quick, the unemployment for the city workers wasn't paid in 6 quarters. Their laggers, which is their retirement, wasn't paid for 6 quarters. And now that it's all getting brought out, they're just trying to throw the blame on everyone instead of saying, okay, well, we'll get it fixed. And that's a problem with a lot of them, is they just won't admit fault and they double down on their mistakes.
Yes, they do. And I make mistakes. I screw up every day.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm only a sinner saved by grace. That's all. So if I did something wrong, I'm not up to it. That's just, it gets in my DNA. I have to be able to sleep at night. And that's what I tell people with the elections, because people always want to come after me with the machines. Well, I have tabulators. I don't like the Dominion machines. I've made that publicly known. But we do hand you a paper ballot. You do mark it. It goes through a tabulator. We have a checks and balance. But people get hung up on that. And I understand, again, come see what we do, and I'll show you why. When I go to high schools and talk to them, because I talk to elementaries too, which I'll talk about that here in just a second. But I always tell the high school kids, I'm like, who here has cheated on test? And every one of them raised. I mean, I cheated on test.
Human nature.
It's human nature. So fraud can happen anywhere.
Yes.
But I'm here to tell you why we're doing everything we can to make sure that it's not going to happen. For voting purposes, the mail-in ballots, that's where your fraud happens. That's
Yeah.
the number one thing. Missouri does have you require that you get an application before you get your ballot. I do believe that, only our disabled and our military should be the only ones that receive those ballots. You shouldn't just be able to make it easy on yourself to get a ballot because you don't want to go.
Exactly. Voting is one of the most important things we do as American citizens.
Correct. And if you do it in person, there's that chance for that second chance if you mess up on your ballot.
Yeah.
If you mail it in, there's no second chance. It's doesn't get counted.
Gotcha.
And there's also the problem with the mail system itself. I've actually received ballots a year after the election.
Wow. And that's a good point, because I've had some important mail that I never got, and it's no fault. It's just the system we have. That is a good point, that a lot of times ballots do get lost in the mail.
Yes, they do. And what happens though is the post office calls me at the end of every election. They say, hey, what was your return rate? Well, when I tell them it's in the 90%, like low 90s, they're happy. That's an A in their book.
Yeah.
But that 9-10% that didn't get their vote cast, they got disenfranchised.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that we can do about it, because it was strictly, like you said, it was part of the system where the mail failed us to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that I was going to tell you about with the kids that I'm very proud of with since I've been county clerk is I've actually written a book called Know Your County. And what I do is I actually, for the last 3 years, we've been able to get out and talk to third and fourth graders about civics in the class. So we've been to almost every elementary school in our county. Every year we do about 1,000 kids.
Mm-hmm.
And we tell them about the importance of county government and why it's so important to know your local elected officials. And we talked to them about the stress voting. I stress to them that, I always said, who in here has a birthday? Of course, everybody raises their hand. And I said, well, so do elections. Every April we have an election.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, now why I believe that the presidential election is important. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But we have an election every April, and that's our local election. And that is probably more important than anything, because all politics are local,
and it affects us,
and it affects every one of us. And that's what I try to, and that's the lowest turnout.
It is.
I have 75,000 registered voters in my county, and last April we had 13% show up for an April election.
Isn't that wild?
It's crazy.
That's like in my town, we just had our election in April, and I think, it was like 15% showed
Mm-hmm.
up. And, those are the legislators that affect us directly.
Correct.
Everyone shows up for the big federal elections,
Mm-hmm.
but whenever it comes to the small town or hometown ones, they just stay home.
Well, and even in August, we might get 40% for this one, because
Mm-hmm.
there's so much on the ballot with the governor, lieutenant governor, secretary of state, those races. But for our county and for the state, August is pretty much the election.
Yeah.
So whoever wins August usually wins November.
Yep.
So it's great that 70% show up in November, but you really need them in August to get the right candidates in place. And that's been a big problem we've seen too. You
think that starts with the education of knowing the election process?
Very much so.
And that's pretty cool. You wrote a book and you're teaching these youngsters how important it is and stuff. That's going above and beyond in my book.
Well, I appreciate that, but we're also teaching the teachers though too, because a lot of teachers have no idea what the county government does either, other than they pay their county taxes, they see a sheriff's officer. But when I get done talking to them, the two things I always tell them is I said, please remember these two things if you don't remember anything else. One, there's 4 million registered voters in the state of Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
That means there's more of you than there are of us. There's only 1,300 elected officials. Mm-hmm. And I say elected official because I do not like the word politician.
Exactly.
Politician to me is an ugly word. I know that I work for you and I know the proper role of government. The other thing I tell them is that this is so important because it's a huge pet peeve of mine. We are a republic, and you said it earlier, not a democracy.
Yes.
And if you forget about it, look at that flag. In our classes still say it every morning. But, just say the pledge. To the republic for which I stand, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And under God is the most important foundation that we've lost in our country.
Amen.
And we need to get back to that. And I tell these kids that all the time. And I've had some teachers turn their heads at me, but I'm like, you know what? I'm just telling you what the truth is. And this should be part of your curriculum.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, those are things that I'm very proud of that I've done as county clerk. So fast forwarding a little more, back in 2020, we had the census that came out, and I actually was going to run for CD2 because Franklin County was put 100% into CD2, Congressional District 2.
Okay.
So I was going to run for Congress, and we had about 40% of the lion's share, or 40% of the total vote for that district. So I, thought my chance would be pretty good. So a good friend of mine came up to me and said, hey, Tim, we don't have a good conservative run for lieutenant governor. Would you consider it? I actually had the same feeling come over me as I did when somebody asked me to run for county clerk, because it's not what I wanted to do.
Yes.
And I kind of hesitated the last time, and I figured, if the good Lord's pushing me this way, I'm not going to not listen to him this time.
Yeah.
And if it's his will, I'm going to be there. I have faith in God's plan, and I have faith in what he has planned for me. And if I'm not the lieutenant governor, then I'm still going to be the county clerk, and I'm going to flourish wherever I am. Don't get me wrong. I'd like to win.
Yes.
But that's my plan.
Yes.
But if it's God's plan, it's going to happen one way or the other. And I'm not going to not listen to him this time.
Yeah.
Because we've been able to talk about our faith also out there. And if that was the lesson I'm supposed to learn, then I'm okay with that too. Win or lose, I'm going to be okay where I'm at. But just know that if I win, I'm going to work hard for the people and actually do what it is that the lieutenant governor is supposed to do.
Well, that's like a few weeks ago, I was over at a Republican rally in, I think it was Somersville, and I was talking to this person running for district rep, and he said something that really stuck out to me that I had never heard before. He said, follow the politician home. He said, you know, you hear them talk on the campaign trail. He said, they say they'll do this and that. He said, but follow them home. He said, go home, see what they say about the person running.
Sure.
They said, see what he's done for his community. They know him best.
Yeah.
You know, and that's a really good point, is follow the politician home and
Yeah.
see what they do for their constituents there.
You betcha. It's kind of like, you know, the best thing we like to do. We were talking, you know, before we came on, I believe when we go out, my kids know when we go on vacation, if we have it back home, we don't eat there because we want to patronize mom and pop stores.
Yep.
Those, you find the best food there. You find the best everything there. And so my wife and I have done that pretty much this whole campaign trail too. But I go to the locals and I say, hey, where do you eat?
Yeah.
Because they know.
Yes,
you
exactly.
know, and it may be a little hole in the wall, but sometimes I tell you what, those
best
are the best food you'll ever find.
Dang right.
And my wife and I have really been able to, we've seen a lot more in Missouri than what we ever thought we would.
Yeah.
We've traveled over 35,000 miles through the state, which I think last time we figured it up, we would have traveled the length of Route 66 from Chicago to California back and forth 13 times so far.
Oh my goodness. Just traveling the state.
Just traveling the state. And we have no regrets. Missouri is absolutely a beautiful state when you get off the 4-lane highways and you get into the rolling hills, the farm ground we have. It is absolutely gorgeous. But so the lieutenant governor, some of the roles, honestly, the lieutenant governor only has 2 constitutional roles. One, he or she is in charge of the Senate, and they preside over the Senate, and they only vote in case of a tie. And 2, the other big one is that in the untimely removal or passing of the governor, he or she becomes governor. And so being said that if I'm elected, my job is to be president of the Senate. So that's where I'm going to be. I work for the people, which means I'm going to be in the Senate. And hopefully, one of the big things that I would like to try to do is single subject bills. I do not like omnibus bills. I hate when people say, well, I had to vote on it because, well, the veterans were in it, or the elderly were in it, or our children were in it. Vote on it up or down one way or the other at one-on-one, and then you'll know how people truly stand. It goes back to what you just said. Yeah. Follow the politician home.
And technically, in Missouri, don't we have in our Constitution for it to be a single issue bill? Or maybe that might be
it's single subject bills.
Single subject bills.
Yes, it is in the Constitution.
That's me and governor candidate Chris Wright were talking about this the other day. That, you know, a lot of times these reps and stuff that are elected in, they're attorneys. They're lawyers. What do lawyers do best? They mince words. They twist things to make it sound one way, but it means the other. And in my opinion, as just a Missouri citizen, I should be able to grab that bill, read it, and black and white know what it's saying to me. You know, and we've gotten away from that. So how would we get back to that?
So we'd have to change the Senate rules in order to do that. Okay. But as the chief executive, if you will, of the Senate, I think I should be able to steer that fairly well. Now it's going to take the senators to agree on it.
Yes.
But that's also the other thing too. Let's go to IP reform.
Yes.
IP reform should have been, that was the #1 thing on the Republican Party platform. And we're seeing the dysfunction right now with the Republican Party with the whole delegate situation, going to, you know, Detroit for the national convention. I mean, we are so dysfunctional that it's embarrassing.
It is.
You know, and what I would do as president of the Senate, when we came to the pass where we were still waiting on 2 or 3 senators to sign off to use the previous question, I'd be going out to their districts and talking to their constituents to get, I would go out there because as my job as president of the Senate, I should be able to help do that.
Yes.
And be out there to help. There was no reason other than follow the money on why people didn't do what they do. And 2 of my opponents that are in this race are current senators. And I would encourage listeners to go to their MEC reports and see who they're bought and paid for by.
And MEC, that's Missouri Ethics Commission.
That is correct. And go to mine and you'll see that I'm probably the poorest one in this race, but nobody's outworked me.
Yes.
At all. Nobody has even come close to outwork with me. And that's something I'm very proud of, because then I'm going to work for you, not for the propaganda that's up there.
Exactly. And that's a weird thing that's happened. And I've noticed this election cycle is, and I'm sure it's every election cycle, but they're always, he's outspending me. He's got more money. And putting in the hard work and the footwork is what will get you elected.
Yes.
It's not just the money. And it's honestly, it's just kind of nasty to me that money is what kind of rolls with politics.
Very much so.
And controls it.
Well, in the House, the Speaker of the House is picked by how much money they can raise.
Really?
That's one of the biggest prereqs, is how much money you can raise. There's been a lot and that's why I appreciate the opportunity to come down and speak with you on this podcast. There's been some radio stations that have been really good to me that I've been able to speak with, and they've invited us. But there's others that, because we haven't raised any money,
they won't even
talk to us. I was at a forum in Springfield, and it was a good forum, but one of their prereqs is that they wanted to have a certain plateau that you had to make in order to speak. I was there because, again, if I'm going to represent you, I'm going to be there. Two of my opponents were there because they met the threshold, which is fine. But again, money's the root of all evil, and nothing can be supplemented for hard work.
Yes.
I do know that it is a necessary evil, but we're still putting in the groundwork. And honestly, our message is resonating. The last poll that came out, because again, I have no money, so these polls are not done by me by any way, but I'm sitting in second place. So for a guy with hardly little money, but I'm just out there working, pounding the pavement, we're making a difference.
Well, and then you being out there face to face with these people, you get to talk to them. They see who you are. Yeah. They see what you stand on.
Correct.
And that's a big thing for anymore. I think we've had an evolution into the political sphere to where it's not listening to the campaign candy. It's not listening to the promises, but whenever you get face to face and the personal relationship you build with them and knowing who they are, because usually you can tell someone's lying.
Sure.
And I think that's really important. The door knocking, the being there face to face.
Well, and the fact that I don't care if they're, I'll go speak with any group, because again, I'm supposed to represent you, and we're not going to agree on everything.
Exactly.
Reagan basically said it best too. If you agree with me 80% of the time, we'll get a lot done.
Exactly.
But we're not all going to be 100% on board with everything. I mean, I'm married, been married for 30 years. You're married. You don't agree with your wife on everything, and I definitely don't agree with my wife on everything. But we
make it work.
But we make it work.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we've lost that art. We've lost that art of being able to have a conversation and just throwing in our towel because I don't agree with you, and I'm going to pick up my toys and go away. That doesn't work that way.
I agree.
Sometimes we have to, just like I was brought up, if we got in trouble, we knew there was a spanking coming.
Exactly.
And it wasn't abuse. It was a spanking. It was not.
Nowadays it's turned into, you can't even spank your kids.
Correct.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But Missouri, I feel like this election more than ever is important to get the right people in. You said single subject bills. That's going to be is that going to be your number one priority?
That's my number one priority going in. Yes.
Okay. What are some other things you plan to do as lieutenant governor?
So the lieutenant governor actually sits on numerous boards, and 4 of them that I would really like to dive into and see how I can make the biggest impact. And again, I'm not big, you hear people all the time saying, I'm going to come in and do this and this and this. Well, they're adding layers of government onto it, which means once we feed it, we got to continue to feed it because nobody wants to rip that Band-Aid off and get rid of it. Because,
that's a good point.
It
employs people.
Exactly. And I don't want to add anything. I just want to try to enhance things. So a couple of boards that the lieutenant governor sits on is one, they're an advocate for seniors. For 20 years, I actually sat on a senior center board, 10 of which I was board president. They sit on the tourism commission. For 6 years, I actually was the first chair of the tourism commission in our city of Pacific and chaired that. So I do have experience there. And tourism is huge for Missouri.
Yes, it is.
I like going to other states too, but like I said, just traveling around Missouri, there's a lot of places my wife and I already marked that we're going back just to spend some time to just enjoy.
Yeah, secret hideaways that you would never know about.
Never know about. Yep. And a lot of times, because we put so many miles on our vehicle, we stay the night most of the time, and then we actually take a couple hours to look around and be actually tourists in those areas because we are curious. We want to know. So I would like to emphasize that more. One of the other things is the veterans. Now, I did not serve in our military, but every Friday we were read for Remember Everyone Deploy in my office. That's the one thing that I've made mandated. I know it's probably more purple than it is red.
No, it's red.
It's the reddest shirt I had that didn't have my logo on it for being county clerk. But that's very important to me because I believe in our military. I believe in, making sure that our homelands are secure. I would pick up a rifle today and defend her if I needed to.
Amen.
And then the other thing that I'm really passionate about too is Buy Missouri. Buy Missouri is basically shop local. And being in a mom and pop store at your mom and pop
Yeah.
facility, they're the whole backbone of our whole country. Our whole country.
Yes.
And people forget that. When we sold in 2011, we were losing 8 to 9 mom and pop stores a month.
Yeah.
And that was due to the Walmarts of the world and the big box and the Quick Trips and stuff like that. And we're losing those small mom and pops. And so I'm really big into that. And as I said, traveling around the state, we've noticed that a lot of it, in fact, every area has vacant buildings in it.
Mm-hmm.
Just drive around and look at it.
Yeah.
As with Buy Missouri, I would like to go in and talk to the local manufacturers and local businesses of how do we get you to expand?
Yeah.
How do we get you to buy that building next door that's vacant? Well, a lot of times you might be able to buy the building, but you can't afford to fix it up.
Exactly.
So I would like to use a hand up approach instead of a hand out, and actually see what I can do to help you either demolish the building or bring it up to code. And if you do it within a certain time, then we say thank you. If you don't, then you'd have to be. Now, there's a lot of logistics.
Exactly.
There,
yes.
but the whole pretense is that getting these vacant buildings to be vital assets of your community again and thriving for them. And we could also help with crime. We could help with the squatter problem. I mean, there's all kinds of there's a whole domino effect that happens with this. A real quick story of my family with our ice plant. Back in 1994, my father went to the legislators, and we were going from a 76-ton plant to a 200-ton plant.
Oh, wow.
We were also going to go from 12 full-time employees to 32.
So you're doubling in size.
We were doubling in size.
Yeah.
We had to build a bridge to go across the property that we had bought. And the bridge that we were going to build eventually, there's a road there now that my family donated the ground to that goes across the railroad tracks, and our town did not have a crossing above the railroad tracks that had the bars. So there was no way to get from one side of the tracks to the other.
Gotcha.
So, there was a whole plan in place to do all this to help our community. And my dad actually had a legislator look him in the face and said, move your plant out of the state for 1 year, bring it back, and we'll give you $50,000 for every full-time job that you bring to the state of Missouri.
Oh my gosh. Loophole.
My dad, without blinking an eye, said, forget 1 through 12, give me from 13 to 32, because he's creating jobs.
Exactly.
They told him no. That's the problem. We forget about the companies that are already here, that are already paving the way, that didn't get tax incentives. Let's help them help us. And it's a better system all around. I'm not opposed to bringing new businesses in.
No.
I'm not. But you don't have to give the farm away to do it.
Exactly.
Especially when you have existing people here that are also hurting. That especially when they were, like I said, we were going to double our size. Mm-hmm. And we ended up with employees. When we sold, we had 88 employees.
Wow.
So we went from that 32 to 88. So, I know how to make jobs. We know how to do all that. But to have our government, when we go there and try to ask them for help, and they told us because, we felt like a second-class citizen then.
You make a very good point about this because, I talk a lot with other business owners in Mountain View, in Willow, in West Plains, all these places around here. We're all pretty connected. We keep up with each other. One thing that I noticed they all have in common is it seems like our government, whether state, federal, whatever, it promotes the monopolies, the Walmarts, like you said, the Quick Stops, the whatever. And it seems like they are the ones that get the break whenever the mom and pop shops have the boot of the government on their neck and saying, you're not able to do this. We're not going to help you do this. And to me, and this is like with farms around here too, because, all these incentives or whatever, it focuses majoritively on the big guys, the ones that push through 100, 200 head of cattle a week, a month, or whatever. And it's almost like they're trying to shove out the little guys to make it where it is a complete monopoly where they don't have to compete. Because I feel mom and pop shops, small town farms are the only ones keeping them in check on price.
Agree. Well, yeah, that's where the monopoly does it. So I'll even go back to our industry with the ice industry. In the 70s, when I was growing up, now the Iceman actually literally hit every household in the United States in the 20s, delivering the blocks of ice to the that's where the old saying, the Iceman cometh, come from. Actually, real quick, funny story. There was cardboard signs that had 25, 50, 75, and 100. That meant for how many pounds of ice you wanted. And if there was a blue slash over it, that used to mean that my husband wasn't home.
Okay.
So little trivia there for you from the old time ways.
Oh, that's cool.
But so with modern technology, we went from being in every household to being in none because of refrigeration. So, that really hurt our industry in that aspect. But where I was going with it is that every community had an ice plant of some, and it was usually ice and fuel. Yeah. Because they sold ice in the summer and then they would sell coal in the winter. And when we sold, there was like 19 ice plants around us when I was growing up. And whenever we sold, there was just us and one other company within a about a 30-mile radius.
I never thought about that. That refrigeration
Hmm.
made the ice company take such a huge hit.
Yeah.
Something you don't think about if you don't know.
No, no, it's
Just with innovation, it hurts.
it hurts. Yeah.
Hurts. Wow.
Yeah. If we went to all plastic, pneumatic tires, I mean,
Oh yeah, we'd be out of business.
exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, that same scenario.
Same scenario. Well, that's what I worry about mostly is these like coming out with these like forever tires.
Mhm.
They've started them in the military with the hexagonal shapes and the sidewall and everything, and that worries me because which I understand, like one set of tires, great, but what they're going to do is that one set of tires is going to be sold like a vehicle. You're going to have to take out a 15-year loan to get it.
Exactly. Exactly. So I mean, those are things that people don't realize when they're not in those businesses.
Yes.
I mean, they really don't. They just, well, this stuff just shows up at my door. Kind of like food.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't understand that food comes from farms. I know in my area, being close to St. Louis, a lot of people think the meat comes under the cellophane wrappers. They don't realize that there's actually animals that it takes to produce
and
that.
see the work that those guys put in to
Yes.
get it to the table.
Yeah, I love our farmers, and going back to tourism, one thing that I'd really like to promote is the agritourism, and actually get some of these kids to go to farms to see. I mean, I baled more hay than I care to in my lifetime, and it definitely builds character.
Yeah, it's not the funnest job, but
no, and when they came out with these big round bales, I'm like, wow, that would have been nice, but we did all square.
Yeah,
and
square bales are almost a thing of the past anymore.
They are.
A few farms
you can't find help.
No, you can't. I did it for a nickel a bale whenever I was growing up.
The farmers around our area gave us 25 cents a bale
to split between everyone.
Everybody. It didn't matter if it was you, one other person, or 20.
Yep.
You got 25 cents a bale.
Yep.
So it was usually 5 of us, so we got a nickel a bale.
And then you always get the driver. You make sure he gets the least amount.
Exactly. Well, he's not working.
Exactly.
Well, and I was always a thrower because, as you can tell, I'm a little guy. So I was a thrower. I was not a stacker.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So promoting this agricultural tourism. So what are some things to start enacting these steps that you think?
Just by getting with the farms already that are interested in doing it and setting up tours, working with local chambers to be able to promote their century farms or their farmers in their area that are willing to do this. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to do this. And again, not adding a layer, because going back with the whole thing with the Buy Missouri program, I would work with the IDA boards or the chambers in their local communities because they know their communities and who they need, and they can help regulate that instead of us having another layer of bureaucracy, if you will, that's going to say no, yes, no, yes. I mean, it just, again, we can do things and do them right without having to add that one person to it.
Well, with that agritourism, that brings up a really good point right here, is that with that, it would almost be possible for them to expand their business to USD grade their meat, keep it in a freezer, and then sell it as these tours are going on.
Correct.
And it would create more income for these farmers.
Yes, very much so.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so, I mean, again, it's all part of that giving back. And, again, it's and educating because, we need to let people know that this is where their food source comes from. And if we give it up, it's kind of like the whole deal with allowing China to buy farm ground, or any no foreign entity should ever own any of our property for a multitude of reasons.
It's a legal invasion.
It's exactly. I can't go over to another country and buy anything of theirs. So why should they be able to buy anything of ours?
Exactly. That's a slippery slope, man. Yes. I mean, once it's done, it's still here in America, but if they own it and they have the rights to it, we saw it with those Huawei towers that got erected by China. It's been like maybe 5 years ago now, but China was buying up clumps of land close to military installations. And this was a big deal back then. And these new Huawei phones were coming out. These phones were awesome. I'd played on one. I'm like, man, these are really good phones. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it turned out that these Huawei towers were stealing data from these military installations and sending it back to the CCP, and it's just stuff that, if legislators would look at it and have common sense, they'd be like, maybe it's not a good idea to have these Chinese-owned towers right there.
But I think the problem there goes back to follow the money.
Yeah.
Because when they're bought and paid for, again, I don't want to speak ill of my opponents, but, all you got to do is follow the money. And two of them in particular follow their votes. They're going to try to buy the election. There's actually 3 people in my race that are just going to try to buy the election that are not working. And that's sad, but again, win or lose, I'm not going to be outspent. I mean, I will be outspent. I'm not going to be outworked.
Exactly.
And so if I lose, I can still hold my head up high and know that I did the best job I can. Because, it goes back to the 2 farmers, that prayed for rain.
Yeah.
Who did God give favor to? The guy that got his field ready or the guy that just sat there and prayed for rain?
Exactly.
We're going
put in the work.
Yeah, we're preparing our field.
Yeah.
So God's going to bless us one way or another. And, we're just hoping for the best. But I need people's help on that too. And they, follow the money.
Yeah. And that's it. Like we were talking, and I know I'm kind of repeating myself here, but the fact that they think money just can win the election nowadays is it shows the cracks in our republic.
Very much so.
And we got to do something to stop that. Like you say, back to the basics with Baker. What do you mean by back to the basics?
Just doing things simple, going back to common sense things, going single subject bills.
Yeah.
That's basic. That's common sense stuff.
Yeah.
And then again, if you don't vote on it because you're getting paid off by this, and I'm going to know,
Call it out.
I'm going to call it out. It's just simple stuff. We need to get people back in our government that truly knows the proper role, which is to protect your rights and freedoms and liberties. That's it.
Yeah.
If we went back to what our Constitution truly says, we wouldn't have we fought a revolution to break away from England for a 2% tax, and we're getting taxed to death, and people are just, oh, okay.
Exactly.
I don't, people, I talked about this on one other radio station that I was on, that they're still looking for somebody that Bidenomics has actually helped them.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, my 401k has been drained because we've had to help our kids. We've had to sustain our own life. Yeah. And I'm not talking that, we're eating fillets and lobsters. I'm just talking the basics, just basic food, basic electric, basic
staying
fuel,
alive.
And so our retirements have been drained because of that. That's not basic. I mean, we've worked our whole life to where we could retire, but now we're going to be in that same boat that we're going to be working forever regardless.
And I really think the powers that be want that. I mean, maybe it's not this nefarious scheme, but the more people struggle, the more they need the government. Mm-hmm. And right now we have this government that is just this industrial complex of, if people need them, then they can get by with more, because, you sacrifice security mm-hmm. for free stuff, or freedom for free stuff, and I think at the end of the day, that's kind of where they're wanting to go with it is, okay, well, you can't, take the COVID pandemic, for example. How many small businesses got wiped out? Oh. Thank God we didn't.
Yeah. Numerous.
But, exactly. And the companies, they got the big breaks, they got the help, they got whatever. And these little, I think it was like, what was it? Like 40% of small businesses across the United States were just wiped out over 2 years' time. Yeah. That's something I feel like legislators should ensure never happens again.
Agreed.
Biggest government overreach ever in America happened under COVID.
Yeah, agreed. And just the whole, the mandate of the shot and everything else, I can tell you that in our office, they were wanting everybody to rotate week on, week off. I worked every day. Yeah. Because as a leader, I'm not going to
not be outworked.
Yep. I just won't do it. I refuse to. And I work for the government in that aspect. Yeah. I fought it tooth and nail. I kept fighting our commissioners on that we need to, support with the ARPA funds, our small businesses, and bigger entities got it. I mean, it's wrong.
Yeah.
I have a real problem with that. I mean, because again, it's the mom and pop stores that constantly get nailed for, and they're the ones that are willing to help the school districts, help the ball teams, and all. Go to Walmart and do that, and they don't give two rats about you. It's a shame.
Well, I always say that. Like in our town, we support the baseball team, we support the school, we support usually anything FFA, all of them. When they come in needing money, the mom and pop stores are the ones there. But it just seems like it doesn't get reciprocated enough.
My wife used to be president of one of the PTOs whenever our kids were in elementary school, and they were always that same way. Oh, we can go to the small businesses, blah blah blah, and then we were talking about stuff, and a subject came up, and they're like, they needed something, and it was hardware related. I'm like, oh, we'll just go to Walmart and get it, or we'll go to Lowe's and get it. I'm like, wait a minute, folks. We have a mom and pop hardware store in our town that you just went and asked, and they gave you $100 donation.
Yeah.
Go spend that $100 back with them.
Exactly.
And I bet you get another 100 if you ask for it.
Exactly.
Because they appreciate that. But when you just say I want, and then you go somewhere else because you can save a nickel, I have problems with that.
I do too.
I have huge problems with that.
We had that happen within my town. Like we would always donate to what, like Chamber of Commerce or whatever was doing, but they would never give us a bid for their vehicle tires. And at one point I was just like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to stand up and we'll be like, guys, I don't care if I win the bid. Yeah. Give me the shot.
Give you the opportunity. You betcha. Yeah. Sometimes we just want to be invited to the party, right?
Exactly. And that means the most, even if you don't get it, so what, but you got the chance to try.
Correct. And we miss that so much in our government and all that. So
coming back to what we were talking about, you said you're on all these committees, right? Tourism committee. What were they?
Was on the tourism chair. I was tourism chair actually for 6 years in the city of Pacific whenever it was first conceived. Been on numerous chamber boards, United Way, senior center boards. Been on. I'm a current chairman of a bank. I sit on Grace's Place, which is a nursery for. So I've gone from seniors to infants to 18-year-olds. It's a crisis for infants to 18-year-olds. Just trying to serve my community the best way possible that I can.
And so with these communities that you've been a part of, it's kind of already the job of the lieutenant governor. Like, so you've been kind of knowing these roles before being lieutenant governor.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I was actually preparing for this job my whole life, and,
Yeah.
and just with the experiences that I've had that I can bring to the table that none of my opponents can do.
Yeah. So you're the most experienced candidate for
I would
this
think
job.
so. Yes. For as far as the other duties.
Yes.
I would still, I know Robert's rule because I've
Yeah.
conducted a lot of meetings in my time, and we try to stick to Robert's rules as much as possible. The legislative process, other than, that would be the only curve that I would have. But what I would say to that is that 5 years ago, people took a chance on somebody running for county clerk who had no experience in elections, only ran a business. So I understood that part of it. And since I've been in office, I've saved that $700,000. I've been able to have a better chain of custody of our ballots, really taking that office to what I feel is the next level. So, sometimes taking a chance on somebody that doesn't have what people deem as the best experience as far as governmental is a good thing, because it's a new set of eyes. And again, it's something that
and you're not beholden to anyone.
I'm not beholden to anybody.
Like you said, you're pretty much, it's you and your wife.
It's me and my wife that have been going around doing this. I am beholden to somebody. I'm beholden to my Lord above, but I'm also beholden to the taxpayers that put me there.
Yes, amen.
I'm not beholden to the lobbyists.
Exactly, and that's so important to people nowadays. I think when Trump first started in 2016, he really shined that spotlight on how much money goes into politics.
Oh, very much so. He's shined a light on a lot of stuff that people just constantly wanted to put underneath the rug. And I've had pastors come to me and say, I can't believe I'm going to vote for somebody who's committed adultery, who's done this or that. But it's because he's brought out so much that he truly is, again, as I stated earlier, we're only, we're all sinners saved by grace.
Yep.
And it's
and we all fall short.
We all fall short. There's only been one perfect person.
Exactly.
And we see what he did for us.
Yeah. And what they did to him.
Exactly.
Going around on this campaign trail, you've been all over Missouri. So how's the campaign trail going? How is everything?
It's been very well. When we go to a lot of Lincoln days that we've been to, from what I've been told, they've been record numbers. For example, there's 110,000 residents in my county. Our Lincoln Day had about 200. This year we had about 3, so that's an increase. But where we're really seeing
that's a big one.
But where we're still really seeing the impact is when we're going to communities that only have 14 or 15,000 people, and there's 400 people showing up.
Yeah,
that's very telltale. People are tired of the status quo. They're tired of the establishment. They're tired of the same old, same old. They want to see something different. They want to see somebody that's willing to be bold enough to say, "Hey, we're not going to do this anymore." I've stood by myself on numerous things where nobody else would stand with me because it was right. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm never going to not do what's right. I'm going to fail. I'm not going to sit here and promise you that I'm going to be perfect.
No one's perfect.
No, but I'm going to fight for what's right and make sure that we do what we're supposed to do, which is the proper role of government, and not constantly shove stuff down your throat.
And I think at the end of the day, that's that's all you can ask for in a politician. I'm sorry, not a politician, but a public servant,
yes.
And I don't know, traveling to all these places, where have you seen the most hurt in citizens?
People are like, just with they're hurting at the grocery stores, they're hurting at the gas lines, they're hurting at just with the vacant buildings, like we said, that they have in their communities. They're just tired. They don't know if there's any end in sight. We constantly say this is the most important election of our lifetime. I've heard that my whole life.
Yes.
But you really get to a point where it's like, wow, this really is. I mean, we cannot tolerate another 4 more years. But here's the thing. If we go back to the 10th Amendment, we should be a sovereign state.
Yes.
When we behold ourselves to the federal government, all those strings come attached. Missouri is a very vibrant state and has a lot of good things to it, that we can be a sovereign state, as well as Texas, Tennessee, Arkansas. These are states that are outshining us, that we can do that. Half of our budget comes from the federal government. We have one of the largest dependencies on the federal government of any state in the union. And that's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
And that puts us right up there with like California and Illinois and all those.
Correct.
And New York. I mean, it's kind of mind blowing that a ruby red, quote unquote, ruby red state like Missouri would be so beholden to federal money. I mean, another thing is like bringing in new fresh eyes to the government. I've heard some person talk about something that I've never heard on the campaign trail yet. They were talking about going nuclear for Missouri. That, we have one of the biggest nuclear research colleges in the United States here, and they were talking about possibly going to nuclear energy for Missouri. I mean, these are just new ideas that people are looking at. I mean, not just keeping with the status quo.
Sure.
And I think that's really important. We have to evolve with the times.
We do have to evolve with times. We also need to, in our county, Ameren has one of the largest coal plants in the state. And, they've done so much to clean up their plant, but they're, not wanting to bring in coal either. I mean, and that's really,
it's a detriment.
It's a detriment. I'm all for green energies. I mean, I actually have solar panels on my house, I don't have them in the field. They're on the house. Yeah. I'm all for different, but we can't, you have to have a rationality to do that.
Exactly.
We actually were looking at the ice plant. We were actually looking at windmills. We were looking at 2 windmills for our ice plant, and it was going to be about a $2 million project to put it in. And Ameren was actually going to give us $1 million to do it. We did a year's worth of survey on an anemometer test, and we were going to have the windmills 250 feet up in the air in order to do it. And we had enough free fall to go north, east, and west. But if we went south, we were going to go over railroad tracks. And back then, this was back in 2008. At that time, if you stopped a train due to your fault, it was $50,000 an hour. And so we decided not to do that project because just in case something happened. But we actually looked at putting in windmills for our plant, and then in the off season, it would have helped our community.
Yes.
But because of that free fall, it just wasn't going to be feasible for us to do that.
Yeah, I understand that.
But yeah, we do have. But again, we have to look at other alternatives. We have to, again, like I said earlier, the statement, that's the way it's always been done. I don't like that. Yeah. If it's the best way to do it, then I agree with that.
Yeah. And it's worth looking into, doing the research and just seeing what would be best.
If we would have stayed with the status quo, we would have never exceeded into the business that we were in. Yeah. In the 80s, my father wanted a bottle of water, and people thought he was crazy. And we actually got behind the 8 ball on that. But whenever we sold, we actually bottled water and did a lot of private label. Wow. But he was already past. He was ahead of his time on that, because I grew up drinking out of a garden hose. Yeah.
I remember my dad, he talks about this bottled water thing. He said, whenever I was a kid, people trying to sell bottled water, he said, I thought they were the stupidest people in the world. He said, but dang, you go in, and he said, I buy it now,
because it's because we don't know what they're putting in our water.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, we actually, in our town, they were putting in fluoride and some other things, but our filtration system that we had for our plant took it all out.
Oh, cool.
So, but still, it just, that's why people are buying bottled water now.
Yeah.
It just, but they went on with the times and didn't just stick with the same, same
innovated.
Innovative.
Yeah. Before we wrap up here, what's your message to the people?
My message to people is that I'm just a simple person. I'm going to get up every morning. I'm going to go to work and do my job for the citizens of Missouri. I'm an open book. Anybody wants to ask me anything, they can sure reach me by our website or through Facebook. Our Facebook page is Tim Baker for Lieutenant Governor. Our website is citizensforbaker.com. My personal cell phone number is 636-575-9609.
Oh, wow. If
I don't answer, leave me a message. I will return phone calls because, again, I know that I'm going to work for you, not the other way around. I'm just a guy that's trying to do the right thing. I know the proper rule of government. I'm not bought and paid for by lobbyists. And like I said earlier, I'm going to be outspent, but I'm not going to be outworked.
Well, Tim, I see it. I think the people will see it. And I look forward to this election. And I wish you all the best on the campaign.
Thank you so much.
trail.
And I appreciate the opportunity to be down here today.
Well, thank you for taking the time. Thank you, sir. Mm-hmm.